Late afternoon in Portland, Oregon. Downtown still buzzed with activity, but along the Willamette River, the world seemed to hold its breath. The last golden rays of sunlight pierced through the leafy trees lining the riverbanks, glinting off the water like tiny shards of glass. Gentle waves lapped at the shore, mingling with the rustling leaves to create a soothing rhythm, peaceful, yet thought-provoking. Ethan Parker sat on an old stone bench near the river. In his hand, he held a cup of steaming coffee, eyes fixed on the slow-moving water. But his mind was far from calm. He had just finished an intense week of work on complex cases. Criminals were cunning, motives often unclear, and every decision, every action left him analyzing and second-guessing. Fatigue and tension clung to him, along with a subtle loneliness that made him crave a moment of solitude. A quiet corner to reflect. He took a deep breath, trying to release the tightness in his chest, letting the sound of the water, the breeze, and the late afternoon sunlight wash over him. Yet memories of the case lingered stubbornly in his mind, questions of morality, right and wrong, and the intricacies of human psychology he had yet to solve. Suddenly, a light touch on his shoulder made Ethan startle. He turned around. "Ethan, here you are again," said a calm, warm voice, familiar, yet tinged with mystery. Before him stood an older man, his face kind, but eyes deep and knowing. This was Mr. David Miller, the man Ethan had met months ago during a case investigation in the Cascade Mountains. Ethan remembered the tiny wooden shack on the mountain pass where Mr. David had appeared, like it had, materialized in a single moment and vanished just as quickly, leaving him both astonished and curious. "Mr. David, what are you doing here?" Ethan asked, a mixture of surprise and delight in his voice. "Thanks to you, I solved the case so fast. We tracked the culprit and caught him. But that day, when I tried to find your little shack again, it was gone." Mr. David smiled, calm and deliberate, his gaze drifting to the river. "Maybe you were too caught up in the case that day to notice," he said. Ethan frowned. He remembered driving slowly, scanning the mountain pass carefully to find the shack, but it had disappeared. A strange, inexplicable sensation crept over him, a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. He shook it off and decided to focus on the present. "So, are you here in Portland for some work?" Ethan asked, curiosity edging his tone. Mr. David took a slow sip from his thermos, his eyes still on the river. The sunlight reflected off the water, casting a soft golden glow on his face, making him look even more mysterious. "Where there's destiny, I go. Whom I am meant to meet, I meet. The river is beautiful, isn't it?" Ethan stayed silent for a moment, absorbing the scene. There was a serenity in Mr. David, as if every element around him, the sunlight, the river, even the sound of the wind, was part of his presence. Harmonizing with him in perfect stillness, he observed Mr. David carefully. The older man wasn't ordinary. Every word, every action exuded a profound understanding of life and human nature. Ethan wanted to hear it all. "Mr. David, you mentioned the other day that criminal tendencies can form when one loses respect for those worthy of it. I've been thinking about that for weeks. I've started to understand it a little. And I want to ask you something. How can we raise a smart child?" Mr. David smiled, eyes sparkling with warmth and wisdom. "Intelligence is partly innate," he said. "But if nurtured correctly, innate intelligence can multiply tenfold. Misguided nurturing, on the other hand, will limit it. The first 10 years of life are critical. From birth to age 10, the brain develops rapidly. After that, intellectual growth slows, and changes are harder to make. Ethan listened, captivated. Every word seemed like a brick being laid carefully in his mind, constructing a framework for understanding intelligence, education, and morality. Mr. David continued, his tone steady, carrying the weight of experience. Parents who want their children to be intelligent must be intelligent themselves. They need to create challenges that force the child to think critically. For instance, a child sees a bottle of milk on the table. Don't give it to them directly. Introduce small obstacles and let the child figure out how to reach it. As they grow, when guests arrive, they must learn to address them properly, understand how to behave. The child must think and find the answers. Ethan raised his eyebrows. But what if the child lives comfortably, always served, never needing to think? Then even the smartest genes will atrophy. Challenges, ethics, and moral dilemmas help children develop a balanced mind, intelligence and character together. Ask the child what they'd do if they saw someone poor. If their answer isn't right, guide them. Ask what they'd do if home alone with a visitor. Place them in situations. Force complex thinking from early on. Ethan exhaled, a mixture of awe and inspiration flooding him. He thought of his 3-year-old son, Oliver, and how he could apply these principles to his own parenting. Anxiety and excitement intertwined, awakening a deep sense of responsibility. He asked, half joking, half serious, "I still haven't asked. What's your name, sir?" "I am David Miller," the older man said, smiling warmly yet retaining that signature air of mystery. Ethan smiled back, realizing that this encounter was not just a lesson but a lesson in life itself. Mr. David was like a lighthouse, guiding him through doubts, complex cases, and the pressures of everyday life. In that moment by the Willamette River, with the golden light shimmering on the water and casting its glow over their faces, Ethan understood that the philosophies Mr. David shared would shape not only how he raised his son, but also how he viewed his work, colleagues, and himself. And so the story begins. A late afternoon in Portland. A young police officer named Ethan Parker, a mysterious older man, Mr. David Miller, and the philosophies of intelligence, ethics, challenges, and mindfulness, gradually unfolding to guide the journey of Ethan and his son. The next morning, the early sunlight in Portland filtered through the trees along the Willamette River, casting thin streaks of gold on the water's surface. Ethan Parker walked along the stone-paved path, holding his coffee cup, still savoring its rich morning aroma. His mind was still occupied with the meeting he had had yesterday with Mr. David Miller. Everything Mr. David had said about intelligence, ethics, and challenging children felt like a roadmap guiding him in raising his son, Oliver, and even in how he approached his work. Ethan stopped at a small grassy area, sat down and closed his eyes, trying to recall every detail Mr. David had shared. He remembered the emphasis on innate intelligence being just the starting point. If nurtured properly, innate intelligence can multiply tenfold. The words echoed in his mind, challenging yet inspiring him. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared before him. Ethan opened his eyes to see Mr. David Miller approaching slowly but steadily, his kind face still carrying that aura of mystery. "Good morning, Ethan. You're up early," Mr. David said warmly. Mornings by the river seemed to clear the mind more than anything. Ethan stood, smiling. "I wanted to take the time to think about what you shared yesterday. I want to understand more about how to create the right challenges for children, so their intelligence can grow to its fullest potential. Mr. David nodded, eyes briefly scanning the river before focusing on Ethan. You see, making a child smarter isn't just about giving them knowledge or fancy toys. They need real situations that force them to think, make decisions, and find solutions. These situations don't have to be overly difficult, but enough to engage both their intellect and ethics. Ethan sat beside him, listening intently as Mr. David elaborated. For example, when a child sees a bottle of milk, don't hand it to them directly. Place a small obstacle, maybe a chair, or some minor barrier, so the child has to figure out how to reach it. Through this process, the child learns observation, planning, trial and error, and ultimately solving. Ethan nodded, imagining his 3-year-old son, Oliver, crawling toward the milk, trying multiple ways, and finally discovering a method himself. A soft smile crossed his face, a mixture of pride and awe at the child's ability to think independently. Mr. David continued, as the child grows, challenges should become more complex, not just physical, but ethical as well. When guests arrive, it's not just about teaching proper greetings. Ask the child, what should you do if a guest comes while you're home alone? The child must think to respond appropriately, not just follow routine. Ethan pursed his lips, concentrating on this new perspective. He realized these lessons didn't just teach intelligence, but also ethical judgment and decision-making. And what about social dilemmas? Ethan asked. For instance, if a child sees someone drop money or a valuable item. Mr. David took a slow sip of his tea, calm and deliberate. Then, it's not just about asking what they would do. Analyze consequences together. If you take this money, what might happen? If you return it, what might happen? The child learns to consider ethics in every choice, not just desires. Ethan's eyes brightened as he envisioned Oliver growing into a boy not only smart, but capable of thoughtful, morally sound decisions. Mr. David leaned slightly forward, his tone gentle but weighty. If these exercises are consistent from an early age, the brain develops holistically. Complex thinking and ethical reasoning grow together. Parents must be intelligent, patient, and persistent. The results will be evident. The child becomes smarter than their natural intelligence alone would allow. Ethan exhaled deeply, a mix of worry and excitement filling him. He knew patience and cleverness were required to apply this with Oliver, but imagining the results filled him with determination. Mr. David gave another example. When the child is home alone and a visitor arrives, it's not only about manners. Ask, if you were home alone and someone comes, what should you do? If the child answers incorrectly, guide them gently. This process develops thinking and foresight, teaching them to anticipate and avoid potential dangers. Ethan gazed at the Willamette River, the morning sunlight sparkling on the water, reflecting in his eyes like rays of hope. He realized that meeting Mr. David Miller was more than a lesson in it was a lesson in life, intelligence, patience, and compassion. Mr. David, Ethan said, his tone respectful, I want to practice all of this with my son. I understand that if done correctly, I can help him develop both intelligence and ethics together. Mr. David smiled, eyes bright with satisfaction. You understand, Ethan. A smart child is a combination of innate ability and proper nurturing. Daily challenges, ethical guidance, and thoughtful exercises shape a well-rounded person. But you must prepare yourself, smart, patient, and attentive parents are the key. Ethan nodded, feeling both relief and determination. He knew raising Oliver wouldn't be easy, but with guidance from Mr. David, the path ahead was clear. In that moment, by the Willamette River, with morning sunlight reflecting off the water and illuminating their faces, Ethan sensed that Mr. David Miller's philosophy would transform not only how he raised his son, but also how he lived and worked. A long journey lay ahead, a journey of intelligence, ethics, and challenges full of excitement and promise. That morning, Portland was shrouded in a light mist. The early sunlight filtered through the trees along the Willamette River, reflecting off the water in shimmering silver streaks. Ethan Parker walked along the riverside path with his 3-year-old son, Oliver, carrying a bottle of milk and a few simple toys, ready for their first practical session based on Mr. David Miller's guidance. Oliver ran ahead, laughing, eyes sparkling with curiosity. Ethan watched his son with both affection and anticipation. He knew that challenges ahead would not only teach Oliver to think critically, but also help him develop ethical reasoning. At the same time, Ethan worried whether he had the patience and insight to guide his son properly. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared. Mr. David Miller approached slowly, his face gentle, yet eyes deep and wise, exuding both authority and kindness. "Good morning, Ethan, and hello, Oliver," Mr. David said warmly. "Today we will practice some of the lessons I shared with you. Are you ready?" Oliver looked at Mr. David with curiosity, a little shy, then nodded. Ethan smiled, stepping back to let the older man take the lead. Mr. David walked to a small stone bench and placed a bottle of water, along with several small obstacles around it. "This is the first lesson," he explained. "A child must learn to observe, think, plan, and solve problems on their own. Oliver, do you want to get the bottle?" Oliver nodded eagerly, eyes fixed on the bottle. But it wasn't easy. A small pillow, a wooden block, and some stacked toys blocked the path. He crawled toward it, stumbled over the obstacles, paused, looked around, and tried a different approach. Ethan watched, heart racing with excitement and pride. He saw his son starting to think, analyzing the obstacles, experimenting, adjusting, and eventually, after a few attempts, reaching the bottle. Mr. David smiled. "See, Ethan, a child learns fastest when the challenge is just hard enough. The brain has to work planning, testing, adjusting. This is how complex thinking develops early on." Ethan nodded, joy and hope filling him. He resolved to maintain these lessons daily, knowing the benefits would multiply over time. Mr. David continued, "The second lesson involves ethics. Ethan, do you have some coins ready?" Ethan pulled out a few coins and handed them to Mr. David. "Oliver, look, here are some coins on the ground. What would you do?" Oliver picked one up, uncertain. Mr. David calmly asked, "What happens if you keep them all? What happens if you return them to the owner?" Oliver shook his head, unsure. Ethan smiled subtly, letting him think through the scenario. Oliver looked at each coin carefully, then handed one to Ethan. Ethan pretended to return it to the owner. Following the scenario Mr. David had suggested, Mr. David nodded approvingly. This teaches a child about ethics. It's not just about knowing right from wrong, but thinking through the consequences of their actions and choosing responsibly. Next, Mr. David guided Ethan through more complex, practical scenarios. Visitors at home. Mr. David acted as a visitor. "Oliver, if you're home alone and someone comes, what should you do?" Oliver answered incorrectly at first, and Mr. David gently guided him. After a few tries, Oliver learned how to greet, ask for the visitor's name, and behave politely. Movement and thinking challenge. Toys were scattered around. Oliver had to figure out how to stack or move them to reach a favorite toy. Mr. David explained, "Here." The child exercises both physical skills and cognitive thinking, observing, testing, planning, advanced ethical scenario. A small bag with toys was left within sight. Ethan pretended to be a stranger who forgot it. Oliver observed and decided to tell his father. Mr. David smiled. This teaches a child to combine ethical awareness, reasoning, and safe decision-making through each situation. Ethan could see Oliver's mind developing. His eyes lit up when solving problems, and his face glowed with understanding when he realized the correct choice. Mr. David turned to Ethan. "See, Ethan? Intelligence isn't just inherited. The first 10 years of life are golden. If nurtured properly, a child can surpass their natural intelligence. But you must be patient, smart, and consistent in guiding them." Ethan exhaled, feeling a mix of exhaustion and joy. He knew the journey would be long. But moments like these, watching his son think, decide, and act made every effort worthwhile. As midday approached, sunlight streamed through the trees, illuminating the faces of father and son. Oliver laughed and ran around. Ethan watched proudly, and Mr. David smiled, satisfied. One day of lessons ended, but the philosophy and methods that Mr. David Miller imparted would stay with Ethan and Oliver for years to come. In that moment, by the Willamette River, Ethan realized that proper education not only cultivates intelligence, but also shapes ethics, patience, and independence, the foundation for life ahead. The morning in Portland was brighter than the previous day. Golden sunlight filtered through the trees lining the Willamette River, scattering sparkling reflections across the water. Ethan Parker walked along the riverside path with his 3-year-old son, Oliver, carrying a small backpack filled with a few toys and props for today's advanced learning exercises. Oliver bounced along happily, eyes wide with curiosity and excitement, while Ethan followed, a mix of love and nervous anticipation in his heart. He knew today's exercises would be more challenging, combining thinking, physical coordination, and ethical decision-making. But he trusted Mr. David Miller's guidance. Soon, a familiar figure appeared. Mr. David Miller approached, his calm demeanor radiating wisdom and authority. "Good morning." Ethan, Oliver, Mr. David greeted warmly. "Today we'll raise the difficulty level. Are you ready, Ethan?" Ethan nodded. Double quotes, "Yes, I'm ready." Oliver is excited too. Mr. David placed a few objects on the grass: wooden blocks, plastic cups, a small bag, and some coins. Today's lesson combines thinking, movement, and ethics. Oliver, you will need to consider each step carefully before acting, Mr. David explained. Oliver's eyes lit up as he took in the setup. Ethan smiled but felt a pang of concern. His son was only 3, and these challenges were advanced. Challenge 1. The path to treasure. Oliver had to reach a small treasure box containing his favorite toy. But the path was blocked with obstacles: wooden blocks, stacked cups, and scattered cloths. He crawled forward, paused, observed, and tried a different route. Ethan watched silently, heart racing. After several attempts and adjustments, Oliver finally navigated through the obstacles and touched the treasure box. Mr. David smiled, See, Ethan. The brain develops rapidly when a child must plan, experiment, and adjust. This is how complex thinking begins early. Ethan exhaled. Pride swelling in his chest. Challenge 2. Practical ethics. Mr. David placed a small bag containing coins and toys a few feet from Oliver. Oliver, see this bag. It's not yours. What will you do? Oliver furrowed his brow, tilted his head, and reached for the bag, then hesitated. Ethan remained silent, letting his son observe. Mr. David asked gently, "What if you only take one coin? What if you return everything? Who would be happy? Who would be upset?" Oliver looked at Ethan, then at the bag, pausing to think. Finally, he carefully placed all coins and toys back in the bag, walked to Ethan, and said, "Dad, I'll return everything to them." Ethan nodded. "That's right, Oliver. Returning something to its owner is the right choice, and it will make someone happy." Mr. David smiled approvingly. "See, Ethan. Children learn to assess consequences and choose proper actions when guided gently, without force." Oliver grinned, eyes shining with understanding. He was beginning to realize that his actions affected not just himself, but others. Challenge 3. Physical and cognitive coordination. A few wooden blocks and cups were scattered around. Oliver had to move and arrange them to create a path to reach his favorite toy. While doing so, Mr. David asked questions. Which route do you think is the fastest? What happens if you take a longer path? Oliver experimented, thought critically, and finally figured out the most efficient path while maintaining balance and avoiding obstacles. Ethan's heart swelled with pride and amazement. He realized his son's mind was developing minute by minute, not just from genetics, but from the environment and properly designed challenges. Final exercise. Predicting and preparing for consequences. Mr. David created a scenario. Ethan pretended to be a stranger who forgot a bag. Oliver had to observe, evaluate, and decide what to do. After a few moments of consideration, he chose to inform his father. Mr. David nodded. This teaches children to combine ethical awareness, reasoning, and safe decision-making. By midday, sunlight streamed through the trees, illuminating the faces of father and son. Oliver laughed and ran around. Ethan watched proudly, and Mr. David smiled with satisfaction. Ethan realized that the journey of teaching his son would be long. But moments like these, witnessing Oliver think, decide, and act, assured him that with patience, intelligence, and proper guidance from Mr. David Miller, his son would grow up balanced, ethical, and intelligent. The morning sun in Portland was gentle, scattering golden light through the leaves along the Willamette River. The water rippled softly, birds chirped cheerfully, and the occasional distant laughter of other children filled the air. Oliver Parker ran along the riverside path, his small backpack bouncing on his back, laughter echoing as he explored. Ethan walked beside him, holding his son's hand, a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation in his chest. Today, Mr. David Miller would guide them through lessons in social awareness, observation, and evaluating consequences in complex situations. Oliver's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Ethan knew these exercises would challenge his son in ways that went beyond simple problem-solving. They would require him to observe, think critically, and make careful decisions. But Ethan trusted Mr. Miller's approach and felt a deep sense of happiness, watching Oliver eager to learn. Soon, the familiar figure of Mr. David Miller appeared, walking slowly with a calm, authoritative presence, and a gentle smile. "Good morning, Ethan, Oliver," Mr. Miller said warmly. "Today, we're going to practice understanding complex situations and making smart choices. Oliver, are you ready?" Oliver nodded eagerly, his small hand gripping Ethan's tightly. Ethan smiled, feeling both confidence and anticipation. He knew today would be a pivotal step in his son's growth, not only in intelligence but also in empathy and ethical awareness. Mr. Miller led them to a wider part of the park, where a few groups of people were jogging, walking dogs, or chatting. "Oliver, today you'll observe everything around you, not just objects, but also people's actions and emotions. You'll learn how to make thoughtful decisions in complicated situations." Oliver's eyes widened as he took in the scene. Every detail, the elderly woman feeding birds, a young couple talking quietly, joggers passing by, was absorbed by his attentive gaze. Ethan watched silently, noticing how Oliver was already processing, comparing, and reasoning. "Oliver, choose someone to focus on and try to guess how they feel," Mr. Miller suggested. "Are they happy or sad? Why?" Oliver looked at the elderly woman feeding the birds and said thoughtfully, "She's happy because the birds are eating, but if one flies away, she might feel a little sad." Mr. Miller smiled warmly. "Exactly. Observing closely helps you understand others' emotions. When you understand, you can predict how your actions might affect them." Later, Mr. Miller guided Oliver toward a small group of children playing together. He watched as the kids laughed, negotiated turns, and sometimes disagreed. Ethan noticed Oliver starting to ask himself questions silently. "If I take that toy, will my friend be upset? Should I wait my turn?" Mr. Miller glanced at Ethan and said softly, "Ethan, see how he's thinking." When children observe and question on their own, they develop social awareness and moral reasoning. Guidance is subtle, not forceful, but it leaves a lasting impact. Oliver decided to interact, offering a toy to a child who looked upset. He then stepped back to watch the reaction. When the other child smiled and said thank you, Oliver's face lit up with pride. Ethan felt a rush of emotion. His son was beginning to understand empathy and the consequences of his actions. Mr. Miller encouraged further reflection. "Oliver, try to predict what would happen if you acted differently." Oliver paused, thinking carefully. If he grabbed another toy without waiting, it might upset a friend and cause arguments. If he waited, everyone would remain happy, and play would continue smoothly. He chose to wait and observe. Ethan smiled, quietly amazed. His son was learning to anticipate outcomes and make ethical decisions, not just follow impulses. By mid-morning, the sunlight slanted through the trees, glinting on Oliver's face as he ran and explored. Ethan watched, heart swelling with pride, while Mr. Miller observed with satisfaction. Every action was a carefully guided step toward building Oliver's intelligence, empathy, and social understanding. Ethan realized that proper education isn't just about teaching right and wrong, it's about encouraging children to observe details carefully, learning to understand others, feelings and reactions, predicting consequences before taking action. He thought quietly, the journey of raising a child is long, but every moment Oliver learns to think, evaluate, and act independently is a foundational brick for his future. Socially aware and capable of making thoughtful, ethical choices. The afternoon in Portland was cool and gentle, with sunlight slanting through the trees, casting golden reflections on the Willamette River. Ethan Parker and Oliver walked along the riverside trail, with Mr. David Miller walking ahead, his eyes calm yet deeply attentive. Today's lesson would be more challenging, focusing on making decisions in complex social situations and observing the world carefully. Oliver ran ahead, picking up fallen leaves and twigs along the path, eyes bright with curiosity. Ethan smiled, feeling both pride and anticipation. He knew that today's exercises would require his son to think independently, observe carefully, and anticipate consequences in real-life contexts. Mr. Miller led them to a grassy area where a group of children were playing, some adults reading, and a few people walking their dogs. The park was lively yet peaceful, sunlight streaming through the leaves and creating shimmering patterns on the path. Mr. Miller stopped and spoke in his calm, warm voice. "Oliver, today you will watch people and decide how to act in unexpected situations. No one will tell you what to do. You will learn to think for yourself and predict the outcomes of your actions." Oliver paused, eyes wide, absorbing every detail. A boy tripping while running, an elderly man reaching for a fallen ball, a few children arguing over turns. He began mentally asking himself questions. If I help that boy, will it make others happy? Should I intervene or not? A small incident occurred. A ball rolled toward the path where people were walking. Oliver stopped and observed. Mr. Miller said gently, "Watch carefully, Oliver. Who could be affected? What will you do?" Oliver hesitated, scanning the surroundings. A woman reading nearby, people walking past quickly. He reasoned that taking the ball might upset its owner, but returning it or informing someone nearby would make everyone happy. Finally, he whispered to Ethan, "Dad, I think I should give it back to the person who left it." Ethan nodded and quietly guided him on how to approach safely. Oliver followed the advice, his face lighting up with pride. Mr. Miller smiled, satisfied. This was exactly the moment a child thinks independently, anticipates consequences, and acts ethically without pressure. During a brief rest, Ethan and Mr. Miller sat on a bench by the river. Ethan asked, "Mr. Miller, does teaching children to think independently and observe complex situations from an early age help them develop more fully?" Mr. Miller nodded, his voice calm but firm. "Absolutely, Ethan. When children are guided to observe, predict, and choose actions carefully, they develop both intelligence and ethics. Remember, children don't learn from words alone. They learn by observing, experiencing, and making their own decisions." Ethan watched Oliver running, exploring, and analyzing everything around him. He realized that lessons like today's would teach Oliver independence, social awareness, and wise decisions, while nurturing empathy and moral reasoning from an early age. The afternoon drew to a close, sunlight streaming through the trees, reflecting off Oliver's face as he ran and explored. Ethan stood back, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. Oliver's eyes sparkled as he watched and thought, fully engaged in learning. Mr. Miller smiled, satisfied that every action had been carefully guided, leaving a lasting impression. Ethan silently thought, the journey of raising a child is long, but every moment Oliver observes, thinks, and decides independently is a building block for a future that is smart, socially aware, and morally sound. The late afternoon in Portland was cool and gentle. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden reflections across the Willamette River. The soft sound of flowing water mingled with birdsong and the laughter of children playing nearby. Ethan Parker walked slowly beside Oliver, his eyes following every step of his son. Today, Mr. David Miller had prepared a challenging lesson. Oliver would face a decision in a situation where his own interests conflicted with those of others, requiring him to weigh consequences and emotions carefully. Oliver ran around the grassy park, his eyes wide, observing every detail. A group of children playing soccer, scattered toys on the ground, and a boy crying because he lost his turn. He paused, furrowing his brow. This was no longer a simple exercise. He had to analyze multiple outcomes and predict the effects on everyone involved. Mr. David approached, speaking in his calm, steady voice. Oliver, today you must consider several factors at once: your own needs, the needs of others, and the emotions of everyone around. Every action you take will affect someone, and you must think carefully before deciding. Oliver glanced at the toy he wanted, then at the crying boy. He remembered previous lessons. Helping others brings happiness. But now he had to balance his own desires with the well-being of others. 1 second, 2 seconds. He considered, if he gave up the toy, the boy would be happy, but he would have to wait. If he kept it, he would enjoy it, but upset the other child. If he did nothing, conflict might escalate. After a moment, Oliver took a deep breath and stepped forward. Do you want to go first? Then we can play together afterward. The crying boy stopped, a small smile forming on his face. The other children watched and gradually learned the value of sharing. Oliver felt the joy of helping someone else, even though he had to wait. Ethan squeezed his hand, pride shining in his eyes. Mr. David smiled quietly, his voice calm but firm. Ethan, do you see? When a child has to weigh multiple factors, predict consequences for themselves and others, both intelligence and morality develop simultaneously. This is the foundation for independence and social awareness. Next, Mr. David introduced another situation. An elderly woman had dropped her wallet on a nearby bench. Inside were money and personal documents. Many passers-by hurried by without noticing. Oliver observed carefully, weighing the options. If he kept it, he would gain some money but make her unhappy. If he returned it, she would be relieved. But he had to figure out how to approach safely. Oliver took a deep breath and whispered to Ethan, Dad, I think we should return it. Ethan nodded, guiding him on how to approach politely and safely. Oliver did as instructed, handing the wallet back to the woman. Her face lit up with gratitude, her eyes sparkling. Oliver realized that every decision affects others and himself, and doing the right thing brings joy to everyone involved. The challenge wasn't over. A dog ran freely across the park, heading toward the street, potentially dangerous. Oliver carefully observed and predicted. If no one intervened, someone might get hurt. He immediately alerted Ethan and Mr. David, coordinating to safely guide the dog away. Oliver understood that making the right choice requires considering multiple factors, predicting consequences, and thinking of others. During a short break, Oliver and Ethan sat by the riverbank. The golden sunlight reflected on the water, creating a shimmering, magical glow. Oliver's eyes still sparkled as he continued scanning the park, analyzing children, adults, the wandering dog, and subtle changes around him. Ethan watched quietly, heart swelling with pride and relief. Each moment Oliver thought, observed, and made the right decision was a vital building block for developing intelligence, morality, and independence. Mr. David Miller smiled, eyes shining, Situations involving conflicting interests teach children to balance reason and emotion, make smart decisions, and mature in ethical behavior. The afternoon in Portland remained gentle and calm. Sunlight filtered through the tree branches, casting a shimmering glow on the Willamette River like scattered crystals. Ethan Parker walked alongside Oliver Miller on the riverside path. Around them, the soft flow of the river, birdsong, and distant laughter of children created a serene atmosphere. But today, that calm backdrop would host a very special lesson. Oliver would have to face decisions that affected not just himself, but others too, learning to recognize the responsibility tied to each choice. David Miller followed closely behind, his voice warm, steady, and full of quiet authority. Oliver, today we're going further. It's not just about sharing or observing. You need to understand the real value of choices and the responsibilities that come with them. Every decision sets off a chain of consequences. You'll have to consider other people's feelings and needs, as well as potential risks. Oliver paused at a wide patch of grass where a group of kids were playing tug-of-war. Some were excited, others were anxious about not getting to join the team they wanted. Oliver's eyes scanned the scene, analyzing. If he joined in, he'd enjoy himself, but some kids might feel left out. If he stayed on the sidelines, he'd miss out, but it would give others a fair chance. He furrowed his brow, took a deep breath, and remembered previous lessons. Making the right choice isn't always about what you want. It's about balancing the interests of many. A soft exhale from Ethan reminded him. Think about both immediate and long-term consequences. Oliver stepped forward and addressed the group clearly. Let's take turns. This round, Team A goes first, then Team B gets their turn. Everyone will get a chance. Laughter and nods followed. Oliver felt the joy of seeing everyone happy, even if it meant waiting a little longer for himself. This time, his happiness wasn't just personal, it spread to the whole group. Ethan reached for Oliver's hand, eyes shining with pride and warmth. The peaceful atmosphere shifted as a sudden situation arose. A food cart had tipped nearby, and a few milk cartons rolled toward the path, posing a risk of being crushed or causing a child to slip. Oliver paused, scanning the scene. If he ran to pick up the cartons, he could prevent danger, but he might get dirty or slip himself. If he didn't intervene, the consequences could be serious. He inhaled deeply, stepped forward, and carefully gathered the cartons, stacking them safely while reminding the nearby children to stay clear. Standing back, Oliver realized that timely, small actions could protect many people and teach him about personal responsibility. The next challenge was subtler and more social. A group of teens was gathered near a bench, teasing a shy boy. Oliver hesitated. If he stayed silent, he'd avoid conflict, but the boy would feel hurt. If he spoke up, he might be mocked, but he could help protect someone and create a safer environment. 1 second, 2 seconds, he looked the teens in the eye, drew a steady breath, and said, "Please, don't make him feel bad. Let's just have fun and not tease anyone." The teens looked surprised, but slowly stepped back. The shy boy smiled, his eyes lighting up with relief and happiness. Once again, Oliver realized that the right choice isn't always the easiest, but it can create real value for the community. His small action eased tension and encouraged respect among everyone as the sun began to paint the river in golden hues. Ethan and Oliver sat down on the grass, watching the sparkling reflections on the water. Oliver's eyes remained bright, observing every small detail around him. Children playing, couples strolling, birds returning to their nests. He breathed softly, fully aware that every choice, from sharing toys, picking up dropped items, intervening in danger, to standing up for someone, required careful thought, responsibility, and empathy. David Miller walked closer, his voice warm and encouraging. "Oliver, today you've learned something crucial. The value of a choice isn't just about what you want. It's about accepting responsibility for the consequences. When you realize that every action affects others, you develop your mind, emotions, and moral compass simultaneously. That's the foundation for becoming a mature, thoughtful, and trustworthy person." Ethan rested his hand on Oliver's shoulder, eyes glowing with pride. "I'm so proud to see you thinking not just about yourself, but about others too. Every right choice you made today is a step toward becoming a thoughtful and responsible person." Oliver gazed at the river and nodded. Deep inside, he felt a change. Intellect and emotion were no longer separate. Growing up meant recognizing that every decision carries responsibility, and true happiness often comes from helping others. He knew today was an important step, one that would guide him toward understanding the value of choices and the weight of personal responsibility. The morning air in Portland was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth from the Willamette River. Oliver Miller walked alongside his father, Ethan and David Miller, feeling both excited and a little anxious. Today wasn't just about sharing toys or observing others, it was about real, unpredictable challenges that required immediate moral judgment. As they entered the park, a sudden commotion caught their attention. A small child had wandered too close to the riverbank. The water was flowing faster than usual after last night's rain. The child wobbled precariously. One misstep could send him into the river. Oliver froze for a moment, heart racing. He recalled all the lessons David had taught him about responsibility, anticipating consequences, and thinking of others. But this wasn't hypothetical anymore. He had to act. Oliver quickly scanned the surroundings. The bank was slippery, and the current strong. But he noticed a long branch near the water's edge that could serve as temporary support. If he moved carefully, he could help the child without putting himself at risk. Hesitation, however, could have serious consequences. He took a deep breath, fear and determination mingling inside him. "Dad, I think I can reach him safely," Oliver whispered. Ethan nodded, trusting his son's judgment, while David stepped closer, ready to assist if needed. Oliver moved slowly toward the river, paying attention to every detail: the slick mud, the child's sudden movements, the pull of the current. He extended the branch and said firmly but calmly to the boy, "Grab this branch. I'll hold it steady so you stay safe." The child grasped the branch tightly. Step by step, Oliver helped him back onto solid ground. His heart pounded, but relief and pride flooded over him as the boy stood safely. Ethan exhaled, a mix of pride and lingering anxiety on his face. Oliver realized that quick, careful decisions could protect others, but they required focus, courage, and awareness of every possible consequence. Almost immediately, another situation arose. A man walking his dog accidentally dropped his wallet, which rolled into the grass unnoticed by passers-by. Oliver picked it up, remembering lessons on honesty and responsibility. He considered the options: keep it for himself, ignore it, or return it safely. Each choice carried consequences, not just for him, but for the wallet's owner. "Dad, I think I should return this," Oliver said quietly. Ethan guided him, showing the safest way to approach. Oliver walked forward, holding out the wallet. "Excuse me, sir. I think you dropped this." The man's eyes widened, relief and gratitude flooding his face. "Thank you. I didn't even realize it," he exclaimed. Oliver felt a warm sense of pride, understanding that doing the right thing could bring a deeper satisfaction than any selfish gain. Later, they reached the playground, where a group of children was arguing over a swing. Tensions were rising, cries and shouts filling the air. Oliver paused, observing. If he intervened too abruptly, he might make things worse. If he did nothing, someone could get hurt. Drawing on previous experiences, he spoke calmly but firmly. "Let's take turns. Everyone will have a chance, and we can cheer for each other while we wait." The children gradually calmed down, understanding the fairness in his words. Once again, Oliver grasped an important truth. Moral and social intelligence isn't just about knowing right from wrong, it's about communication, empathy, and leadership under pressure. As the sun began to cast golden streaks across the river, Ethan and Oliver sat on a bench, watching the light dance on the water. Oliver's eyes were thoughtful, scanning the park for small details. Dogs running near children, bikes approaching too fast, a toddler wandering off. He reflected on the morning's events, the river rescue, returning the wallet, calming the playground dispute. Each scenario had been a lesson in responsibility, empathy, and awareness. David Miller approached, voice gentle but deliberate. "Oliver, today you faced real challenges. You made quick decisions under pressure, weighed consequences for yourself and others, and acted with courage and integrity. That's true responsibility. Every choice you make shapes not just your life, but also the world around you." Ethan rested a hand on Oliver's shoulder, eyes glowing with pride. "I'm proud of you, son. You didn't just react, thought, analyzed, and acted. That's how people grow, not just in knowledge, but in character." Oliver looked at the shimmering river, feeling a deep sense of clarity. He understood now that growing up wasn't just about learning rules, it was about recognizing responsibility, anticipating outcomes, and having the courage to do what's right. Every challenge, every choice, no matter how small, was a step toward becoming someone trustworthy, empathetic, and wise. In that moment, as sunlight danced on the river's surface, Oliver felt a quiet, unshakable confidence. He could face the world, one thoughtful, responsible decision at a time. The afternoon in Portland was bathed in warm, golden sunlight, filtering through the trees and sparkling on the Willamette River, creating a scene that was both peaceful and magical. Oliver stood on the wide, grassy field, his eyes following every movement of the children playing round him. Their laughter, excited shouts, even the worried glances when someone almost fell, all of it was vivid in his mind. He remembered every moment of the day, saving the child near the river, returning the lost wallet, resolving conflicts at the playground. Each situation had tested his courage, intelligence, and quick thinking. He realized that growing up wasn't just about learning knowledge or skills. It was about the choices he made in each moment, how he considered the consequences for himself and others, and how he acted with courage and integrity. Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder and looking directly into his eyes. "You faced a lot of difficult situations today. I'm so proud of how carefully and rightly you handled each one." Oliver smiled, feeling a calm confidence spread through him. He understood that every decision, no matter how small, had the power to change the world around him. He no longer feared challenges because now he knew how to balance his own interests with those of others, anticipate consequences, and act courageously in the right way. David Miller sat down beside the father and son, his eyes bright, voice calm but warm. Oliver, your intelligence and moral sense grow together when you face real-life situations. Today's experiences will shape you into a mature, thoughtful, empathetic, and responsible person. Oliver gazed at the shimmering river, a deep realization settling in his heart. Growing up is a journey, not a destination. Each day, every choice is a step forward. Every right action is a brick building one's character. He understood that the world isn't perfect, but acts of kindness, courage, and integrity can make a real difference. As the sun sank lower behind the trees, Oliver held Ethan's hand, walking home with a strong sense of determination. He knew that the journey of growing up would continue, and he would keep making the right choices, moment by moment. He wanted to become someone not only successful, but also good, someone who could positively impact the people around him. Life truly is a series of choices, big and small, and every decision affects both yourself and those around you. Oliver's story teaches us that growing up isn't just about acquiring knowledge or skills, it's about recognizing consequences, putting yourself in others' shoes, and having the courage to act rightly, even when it's difficult. Remember, happiness doesn't always come from satisfying yourself. Sometimes it comes from bringing joy, safety, and respect to others. Every kind act, every right decision, no matter how small, contributes to making the world a better place. Live with responsibility, empathy, and courage. Let each choice reflect your intelligence, ethics, and a warm heart. The world becomes a better place, starting with the right actions of each of us, one step at a time, every single day.